Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
I know the passage of time always kind of catches us off guard. We're never going to learn, but it is wild to think that in 1 week from right now, we are going to be sitting in this room post Winged Wheel Podcast night at the LCA. Like, we are 6 days away from our first Winged Wheel Podcast night with the Red Wings this year. Nuts. That crept up on us. Like 3 weeks ago, we were making summer plans.
Yeah, we were talking about, what are we going to head down to Traverse City for training camp or go to the prospect tournament? And somehow it's November and I'm thinking about putting my snow tires on.
I know. Well, I will say that I appreciate that the Red Wings made the tough decision to break the winning streak before Winged Wheel Podcast night at the LCA, because if the run hot went all the way through to November 4th, and then that game is when everything kind of came crashing down, that would have been extra upsetting. So thanks for getting it out of your system right now, Red Wings. We see what you're doing. It's much better that way, and that way we can get back on the winning train with us there, all the Winged Wheel Podcast listeners there and everything. Really just gracious of them.
Have we ever tracked what the Red Wings record is on Winged Wheel Podcast night? I remember the Buffalo loss.
It was not hot to start. It was not hot to start for sure, but it did turn around. We got a couple of wins in there, I believe. So I try not to think about it too much. Boston's going to be a tough test, though, for this one. Part of it has to do with the fact that we started these when the Red Wings were way worse than they are now.
Yeah.
So hopefully that it starts to average out. Anyhow. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, folks. Here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we are going to be talking to you about the Red Wings' two most recent games, which have been a regression to the mean, so to speak, and there's a lot to take from them. Not exactly great. The Red Wings have walked away with a couple of losses, but still lots to discuss on that front. We'll be talking about individual storylines, players like Joe Veleno, and some things that haven't been going well for Detroit. We'll be giving an overview as to what this means for Detroit's season as a whole. As it is in the hockey world, there are a lot of strong reactions, and we're here to break down, what's real, what's worth panicking over, and what's just part of the process. We'll be discussing the Red Wings' upcoming games, as well as some NHL news. We all saw that Shane Pinto was suspended for 41 games for issues regarding sports betting, which was a shock. We'll be talking about teams from across the league. Edmonton is doing their annual thing where they just suck terribly, and now there's rumors of McDavid, being upset and everything again. And it's a fun tradition that we have on this podcast to talk about that and lots more from around the league. Before all that, I need to give you the details about Winged Wheel Podcast night at the LCA. It's this Saturday, November 4th. Get your tickets now. They are going to go away very, very soon. wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings. We actually sold out of the tickets, but with the partnership of our good friends, the Detroit Red Wings, we were able to release 100 more, I think half of which are already gone, but there are still some tickets there available for you. What Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA is a partnered event between us, the Winged Wheel Podcast, and the Detroit Red Wings, where we host a live episode of the show at Little Caesars Arena before the game. And that live episode is going to feature Ken Daniels and Chris Osgood on this rendition of it. So it's going to be very, very exciting. There's going to be an opportunity for Q&A, meet and greet, questions. You can get them to sign things for you. There's going to be merch, prizes, food and drink for you available to purchase. And every ticket buyer, in addition to getting access to that pregame live show, in addition to getting access to obviously the Red Wings game right after, you also get a co-branded Detroit Red Wings and Winged Wheel Podcast officially licensed beanie. You get to sit in Winged Wheel Podcast specific sections. Your ticket is discounted, and a portion of the proceeds benefits the Jamie Daniels Foundation. So it's all for a great cause. Tickets are very finite and they are running out. There's a chance by the time you hear this and you look, they might be gone, but wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings to get your tickets, or go to the link in the description. Also, if you want to support the show and go above and beyond, the way we're able to do all this is through Patreon. Patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to join the Dub Club. You get access to our official Winged Wheel Podcast Discord. You get entered into all of our giveaways. We're giving away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, the vast majority going directly to patrons. And you get access to our Patreon exclusive overtime bonus episodes, which record right after these main ones. It helps us do a lot of things, which we'll talk about later on in the show, but that's everything that we do is thanks to our patrons. So again, patreon.com/winged wheel podcast. Okay, before we jump into the episode today, we obviously have to take some time to offer our condolences and our thoughts due to the heartbreaking news coming out of the UK. Adam Johnson, ex-NHLer, ex-Pittsburgh Penguin, and playing for the Nottingham Panthers over in the UK, passed away in a tragic accident on ice during a game in Sheffield. There aren't really words to describe how heartbreaking and horrific this was. The entire hockey community obviously is broken by this, and everyone is sending their hearts and condolences out to Adam's family, friends, loved ones, etc. So the entire hockey community is mourning this tragic event. So again, our hearts go out to the memory of Adam Johnson. Okay, so the Detroit Red Wings. 2 games didn't go as planned. After what was a phenomenal start that saw them at the top of the league, they are now losers of 3 straight, 1 point of their last 6, going back to the Seattle game where they lost 5-4 in overtime. They lost equivalent 4-1 games in Winnipeg and Boston, the score lines obviously being a little bit different over the course of that game and how those played out. But still, Detroit walked away from Seattle and Winnipeg at home with 1 point out of 4, which wasn't great. Going into Boston, a team that was absolutely rolling, lost to the hands of the Ducks in dramatic fashion just prior. But other than that, Boston has been essentially flawless this year. I want to preface this all by saying I think Boston should be investigating for just being incapable of being bad. No matter how many good players they lose, they just seem to always be unreal.
Yep.
Which, again, we talked about this during our season predictions. Guaranteed to be wrong anytime I bet against Boston, so here we are. But the Red Wings are now walking away with, as high as the highs were previously, this is a pretty deep low coming off of a 3-game losing streak. I have different feelings on how much of this is, just part of the process and et cetera, but we'll talk about the individual games as well. But this is a very stark difference compared to where we were a week or 2 ago.
Yeah, and as fun as that early stretch was, we referenced a million times how a lot of it wasn't sustainable, and that has crept up. We're still very early in the season, but we're early enough, deep enough in that a lot of the metrics and analytics are starting to be worthwhile, and, what's real, what's fake, what does regressing to the mean look like for a lot of teams. And if you look at a ton of the analytics around the Red Wings right now, a 5-3-1 record is about where they say they should be. They're not a bad team. They're not a well above average team. They're not a below average team. They're average in a lot of metrics, and they're above average in a few. Like their finishing rate has actually gone way up this year versus previous years, but their actual expected goals rate is lower, or lower than average, I should say, not compared to last year, because it was still bad last year. Their goaltending is performing well. So yeah, 5-3-1 is about what they should be. The power play looked unreal for the first part of the season, and in specifically the game against Boston last night, it looked every bit as bad as it did 2 years ago. And that's just hockey. You have it some nights, you don't have it some nights. And last night it was comically bad. And I think I even might have said something about Twitter. It's almost shocking how bad some of their puck movement was. And I say that in a complimentary fashion because of how good it was for the rest of the season, that it was such a stark departure from what they've been doing that it actually caught me off guard. Hey, positives in a loss that we didn't have in previous years where you're like, wow, they look bad. This isn't like them.
Yes.
Which is a new statement to add at the end of it. So we got to be grateful even in situations like that with how this season's been going. Yeah, though, the NHL is law of averages. It's a long season. It's a random sport. But things tend to balance out. And if you took the Red Wings' entire season as a whole right now, games they should have won, games they should have lost, 5-3-1 is about right.
Let's talk about the Winnipeg game. That was an interesting one. I think the Winnipeg game was a continuation of some not Detroit's best play that we saw creeping in earlier on, even during the winning streak and then in the Seattle loss. we were kind of debating beforehand, Brad. I don't think Detroit was a better team over the course of the game. You think that they did play well enough and were probably a little bit better on balance. And we can have that discussion in a moment. I do think Detroit brought it on. It took a little bit to wake up. Going down 2-0 isn't ideal, but they were at some point able to bring that kind of pressure to Winnipeg, control a little bit more play. They got one on the board from Raymond, from Larkin and Seider. And at that point, it came down to Connor Hellebuyck being absolutely one of the best goalies in the world. So I don't want to say they got goalied completely, but the goalie made the difference in that game that stopped Detroit from getting back into it. Winnipeg went up 3-1 and then, scored at the end, empty net to make it 4.
Yeah, the Red Wings may or may not have deserved the win. Balance of play was pretty even. It definitely was not a 4-1 game.
No.
The Red Wings deserved a better result than that. But it was typical of some of the flaws we saw even during the streak. The Red Wings were able, especially in the second half of the game, to pin Winnipeg in their zone with prolonged stretches of pressure and grade A scoring chances. And they were controlling the balance of play. And then Winnipeg would have a 2-on-1. And then they'd have a 3-on-1. And then they'd have a 3-on-2. And it felt like Winnipeg didn't generate much, but when they did, it was a great chance, even if not sustained. The Appleton goal in the third period being the perfect example of that, because the Red Wings were controlling that period almost entirely to that point. 2-on-1, bad pinch, bad read. Now it's a 2-goal game instead of a 1-goal game. And we've harped about the Red Wings' struggles to defend off the rush, and that might have been one of the poster childs of that this year before we saw another one the next game. But to that point, it was just a play that didn't need to happen. And it's the NHL. It's easy to say, okay, yeah, well, 10 seconds of a brain cramp should not derail a whole game for you. And I would like to present to you the 6 years of Brendan Smith we had to experience. It absolutely can.
Brendan Smith out here catching strays.
Yeah,
for no
wow.
reasons.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to. That's hockey. You have to be dialed in 60 minutes of a game. And the Red Wings had a really slow start and a couple brain lapses, and that was enough to give Winnipeg a convincing win.
There was a GIF that came out of the Boston game of Derek Lalonde yelling onto the ice, saying, "Wake the F up." And I don't know whether he was talking to the refs or the Red Wings, but it very much felt applicable to Detroit over the past couple of games, because there were long stretches against Boston up until they got the goal. When Veleno gave them some life, they looked completely lifeless. And for stretches of that Winnipeg game, like you said, was it the worst hockey in the world? No, but they just weren't dialed in. Looked a bit sloppier. The breaks weren't really going their way. The offensive firepower wasn't getting through because of the world-class goalie and just the random swings over the course of a season, as you described, Brad. So when you're not easily outscoring your issues, you need to be dialed in and precise, especially against good teams. So you don't want to say they were unsurprising losses, but nothing over the course of the game really inspired that they were going to absolutely dominate like we saw them do earlier in the season.
Again, the things you're grateful for when reflecting on losses of previous years, the way that Boston game was going, if this was the Detroit Red Wings of 2 years ago, you knew it was over, the way they were sleepwalking through it and just the talent disparity. Now this year, because there was optimism for a comeback because they've already done it, it was worth keeping around. And obviously we got to see arguably the goal of the year for the Red Wings. Mm-hmm. So it gave us some reason to kick around. But they're not going to be able to score their way out of problems. Referencing some of the analytics I was looking at this afternoon with the Red Wings, by expected goals, so how many high-quality scoring chances have the Red Wings generated this year? They're dangerously close to bottom 10 in the league again. They are carrying a very high shooting percentage, which is why their offense is lethal. And when you pick up a guy like Alex DeBrincat,
that's real. It's not random.
And Daniel Sprong, you expect the shooting percentage to go up. But when you see the expected goals for that low, you're not sounding an alarm, but it's something to monitor because they're not generating offense. And when you even narrow that down, take out the Red Wings top line, it looks real bleak beyond that. So they have to be flawless on defense. Otherwise, there are going to be games they're not going to score their way out of problems. Here we are on an episode with 2 games in between. They scored 2 goals.
Yeah. The goal in the Winnipeg game was Larkin extending his point streak to 8 games to start the season, and it was also Mo Seider's 100th point, which was very cool. Very fast to that milestone among the quickest in Red Wings history. So small silver lining in that game.
3rd fastest in franchise history. 2nd fastest if you don't count the 80s.
So that is the Detroit game. Ultimately, like Brad said, it wasn't a 4-1 game the whole way through, but one that Detroit didn't come up big enough. And for whatever issues that there were in that game on Detroit's end, which we just outlined, Connor Hellebuyck deserves all the recognition. That was a great performance by him. By the time Detroit did turn it on, he was there to make sure that they stayed at bay. And, going into the Boston game, we thought, 1 of 4 points for games that were winnable for them, I think, based on the opponent being at home, the kind of game that they played, how good they were compared to those teams. I think it was close enough. 1 of 4 is not great. Now you have to travel into Boston. Yeah, they just, again, lost to Anaheim, but still, this is one of the league's best teams this year. Don't know how they do it. They should be investigated. It's nonsensical how well they play hockey, even after losing their best players, but still, I thought Detroit's going to need to bring their A game. They're going to need to be on, even if things aren't going their way. Let's say Swayman is just, absolutely goalieing the Red Wings. They need to be on like they were earlier in the season to come away from this with a 2-point win. And I got to say, up until Veleno's goal in the 3rd period, yeah, it was only 2-0. And you alluded to this, Brad. When they scored, you were like, oh man, this is only 2-1 now. In years previous, this would be 5-1. And this is the difference. Even when you're bad, you're better. And that's how you get better over the course of the season. So that's good. But I will say, until Veleno scored, Detroit looked lifeless, sloppy, imprecise. And it wasn't just a function of, Boston has better players and they're a better team. Sure, yeah, that's fine. But we've seen Detroit execute better. Like, they're passing bad, turnovers bad, their movement on the power play not good. Like, I just didn't see the Red Wings that you could see previous. They looked very, very off against Boston. Yeah.
Mentally, they weren't sharp. A lot of bad reads, a lot of bad turnovers. The irony of it all is it led to a power play for the Red Wings, but Jeff Petrie with what I can say is comfortably the worst red pinch I've seen of the year in the first period, where it was one of those ones, and you can relate to this as a former defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
He took 1 step inwards from the blue line on that play, and I think every Red Wings fan just simultaneously yelled, no!
Because you could see he got beat before he was he was even reached.
He didn't touch the player. He didn't touch the puck.
Yeah.
It was not close, and if it wasn't for, I think it was McAvoy running interference on a Lucas Raymond back check, it was a grade A scoring chance for Boston that probably should have resulted in a goal, because if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Pasternak carrying the puck. If you're ever not going to pinch, maybe not with one of the most lethal goal scorers on the planet on the ice.
Oh my God, his penalty shot goal was sick.
Like clockwork.
Oh my. And it might not have looked like much, but watch all of the movement and fakes with his head and his body.
Dude, he had Ville Husso in the Red Wings dressing room.
Yeah, in Detroit.
Yeah.
And I think nearly every other goalie on the planet would have done that. Like, that's almost impossible to stop.
Yeah.
He is sick. Anyways.
Yeah, and the Red Wings got a power play out of that, which you might have hoped would have been an early game momentum swing, in which the Red Wings almost, I don't know if they gained the zone with possession at any point in those 2 minutes. And you could tell the Wings were mentally off. The biggest flag for that on me was on the power play, they were trying to force that half-wall to bumper pass, and it was
Boston was all over that.
It was never open.
Mm-hmm.
Boston won. You got to give Boston credit. They have a super aggressive penalty kill to the point where it actually makes me surprised other teams in the NHL don't do it. They're willing to give up odd mans away from the play because their theory is, we're going to apply so much pressure on the puck, he's not going to have time to make that read. And it works, and Detroit reacted poorly to it. But even when Detroit did have the puck, Boston knew what they were trying to do, because they've been killing it with the DeBrincat to Larkin or Gostisbehere to Larkin bumper play, and Boston's just like, we're going to cover that. We're going to make you beat us from somewhere else on the ice, And the Red Wings never even got close to figuring that out. Not only did they not try to find other ways to generate that offense, they forced the pass to Larkin. And I counted at least 3 separate times in the first half of the game where Boston picked it so cleanly it was an easy breakout for them.
Yeah. I think 0-3 against Winnipeg and then 0-4 on the power play against Boston, you could sense a little bit of the desperation, but it didn't come with the sensible execution that they've had in previous games.
Yeah, against Winnipeg, I can at least sit here and say a large part of why they went 0-4 on the power play was Connor Hellebuyck. I don't know if Swayman saw a shot from the home plate area on Detroit's power play against Boston.
Yeah, Boston was clinical. The group chat, I think someone said in the group chat, like, Boston looks clinical. They play such a, like, I don't want to call it perfect hockey. Obviously, no one plays perfect hockey, but they play the kind of hockey that wins you games consistently, night in and night out, where, like, even their B game or their C game, like, when they're not on it, they are still doing all the right things all over the ice where it matters.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was the perfect textbook of the difference between the Bruins and the Red Wings. Because the Red Wings defending wasn't that bad on Saturday night. That is not the reason they lost. Husso wasn't bad. I didn't love the McAvoy goal, but whatever. Your goalie's going to let in goals like that every once in a while. Who cares? I mean, to be fair, McAvoy shouldn't have been able to walk by Goss to spare that cleanly, but either way,
you get what you get.
Multiple mistakes leading to a goal. It happens. The Bruins don't cause themselves to lose.
Mm-hmm.
The Red Wings do. And the Red Wings did that game. Again, Boston didn't do a ton to force the issue, to create goals out of nothing against the Wings. They just waited for Detroit to make a mistake, capitalized on it, and then did not make any mistakes themselves. They played conservative, sound hockey, which is everybody rolling their eyes right now. I get it.
That's you rolling your eyes. You hate that.
Yeah, I hate it, but that's how you win in the NHL. That's what the Red Wings are trying to do.
Yeah.
So if you're going to sit here and go, okay, well, I don't want the Red Wings to play like that, I agree. I would rather a much more entertaining brand of hockey.
But then we need Elias Pettersson to come here first.
But the Red Wings are trying to play that brand of hockey. So if you're going to do it, you have to replicate it. You have to play no mistake hockey because you are not going to create enough offense to make up for the gaps. That Jeff Petrie pinch, I hate to keep picking on him, but that Jeff Petrie pinch is the poster child for this is what you can't do in this style of hockey. You cannot do that. I don't even care if Lalonde's very pro defense activating, which most teams are, but you got to make the right read. You have to. It's the NHL. There's no room for forgiveness. Oh, I thought I could get there. Doesn't matter. Don't do it.
Unless you're 1,000% certain on that read, like you can't be.
Or you got to be like, if I'm not going to beat him to the puck, I'm going to put him into the third row.
Yes,
exactly.
It can't be zero. It's got to be both or one. It can't be zero.
If it's McAvoy and Pasternak coming the other way, if you miss, you're not taking that pinch.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows who they're going to be out against.
Yeah.
It's not like you're playing in some tournament league and you've never played this team before. You know exactly what's happening and who's out on the other team.
Yeah, and when it's a guy who's so automatic that it doesn't matter whether it's Husso or Vasilevsky or, Brad's kid Hank in net, like he's scoring.
And as soon as guys make pinches like that, they're like, well, that one's,
yeah.
Where's the trap door? I need to get out of here immediately.
Yeah, my favorite game to play when I watch hockey, whether it's Red Wings or anyone else, is, that's a terrible moment every defenseman has experienced, and they have nightmares about it. And the missed pinch where your body hits nothing and the momentum is going forward and the momentum of the play is going hard the other way, you're just like, you almost wish you don't make it back to the bench because
you just wish the tunnel was like in the corner so you could just open
leave.
the door.
Yeah.
Skate off, get your equipment off.
Not look at the coach in the eyes, that kind of thing.
The absolute inverse of scoring the overtime goal and then leaving the ice.
Yes, yes. No, I agree with what you're saying, Brad. The season is a marathon, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to have high-end power play nights or nights where DeBrincat scores hat tricks or whatever, but the kind of game that the Red Wings are trying to play, the challenge is twofold. One is actually getting better as a team to be able to perform that way, and we've seen early on that they're able to do it. But the second challenge, and I think this is the challenge that most teams, even good teams, face, is how do you bring that game night in and night out? You can't peak all season. No team in professional sports can peak all season. That's just not how it works. But you need to make sure that your floor is really high in that I don't even want to call them low-hanging fruit, but you clean up the parts of your game that, like Brett has said, are unnecessary risks that are going to be detrimental to you on average statistically over an 82-game season. And it sounds plain and simple, but it's very hard. Being a good team is one thing, but being a good team every single night while
especially
traveling.
when every other team is also trying to be incrementally better every single game.
And they've been like Boston's been good for a decade now. Like they've been there. Yeah. And do they have all the same guys? No, but the culture, the systems, the mentality, that all stays. It's hard to quantify on paper or through any analytic, but that's a real thing. Anyone who's played team sports knows that. Teams who win stay winning unless something devastating disrupts that. And I mean, we're seeing it with Boston. And that's why I'm equal parts disappointed in how the Red Wings played over the last couple of games, yeah, but also not terribly concerned because this is an expected challenge. And there are positives to take away. Like Brad said earlier, Detroit's bad. Well, that still left him only 2-1 down. And if not for, I think it's a pretty unfortunate turnover. I think it was Raymond and then the Pasternak penalty shot, whatever. That could have been a 2-1 game going into the third, and then you never know. Detroit might squeak that into OT, and then they get a lucky bounce, and they win a game where they weren't better on balance. So that's good. They kept themselves in the mix, and that's much different. I don't think Husso's been absolutely outstanding. I don't think he's been terrible. I think most games he'll have moments where you're like, he should have stopped that, but also some key saves. He's been sufficient. And so it's not like your goalie's sinking you. You're staying in the games, even against teams who are playing way better. And so your floor is rising. Yes, this is all just part of the process. But this is now the next challenge for Detroit, where you have to see how they handle this adversity. They're in a valley now. They've dipped. How do you step out of it? Because they're going to be facing Boston again in 6 days.
I think the game plan at this point, after watching last night, should be play sound, mistake-free defense and then just give the puck to Joe Veleno at every chance.
That was a sick goal.
That's the best goal a Red Wing has scored on talent in years.
Brandon Carlo's
little inside out.
Oh God! Talk about a defenseman's nightmare. When you're half step behind and they're just turning you around like
when
that.
The pace is just slightly higher than yours as you're backing up. Yeah.
I can't imagine the feeling of getting beat under the triangle as a defenseman and then have it happen twice.
That's not great.
It's not good. That's when you take your stick like it's a baseball bat and you swing. You're like, absolutely not. I'm not getting scored on like this. I will go to the box.
Yeah, I mean, Swayman had no chance. He was in the right spot, and Joe Veleno literally found the 3-inch angle to put that puck, and what a goal.
You talk a lot, Brad. Veleno has a good release. You actually went on a big tirade about this last year. Like, you want more from Veleno's offense. That's what we've wanted for a little while now, and it's not like he'll ever be like a 25, 50-point guy, but he has the kind of release to make an impact from depth, and you were saying, use it more. And we've seen him do it multiple times now this year. Towards the end of last season and this year, this is his 5th goal. He has been one of the shining beacons for Detroit that I still think is a little underappreciated, and that was a sick shot.
Yeah, his issue was never his shot. It was just getting enough looks.
Yeah.
And creating a little more for himself. And, he was a great transition player. He's not bad along the cycle. It was one of those situations of, why aren't you getting more chances? The eye test says you should be getting more chances because he scored on a lot of the chances he got. And going back to another old Joe Veleno narrative, he doesn't always figure it out right away, but at every level he's been at, eventually he's figured it out. In the Q, World Juniors, AHL, eventually he got it. Maybe this is the year it all clicks in the NHL and, he becomes that 2020 guy potentially. I know you said he's not going to be the 25-25 guy. He's on pace for 46 goals right now. I'm just saying, but
46 goals,
5 goals in 9 games. Yeah, that's a 46 goal pace.
Well, Joe, I'm sorry, but the new standards have been applied.
Yeah, can he hit 50? I say yes.
It's nice to see a guy like him, like some of the young guys, have confidence because. Red Wings of previous seasons would have just dumped that turnover back in, went for a change, or tried to set up the cycle. He had the confidence in himself to go right at Brandon Carlo and make that move and create offense by himself. Yeah. So that's a nice, pleasant surprise this season from Joe.
And it was a good forced turnover by Sprong in the neutral zone. Not the first time he's done that this year, actually. So the connection between those two has had its moments where it's looked really good too. That was a continuation of some really solid play from Joe Veleno. And it also ties back into the point I was making earlier, which is even when Detroit's not playing well, they're playing good enough now where they can hang in games. Yeah, it's 2-0 against the Bruins. That's not great. They're a pretty stingy team. You're not going to score easily against them, but you have players up and down the lineup who in a flash can make a difference like that.
Which the Red Wings have been sorely lacking for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. You can't bank on Joe Veleno to give you the spark every night. Like if you're that far in the game and Joe Veleno finally gave you a spark, the game's not going well. Let's call a spade a spade. But it was only 2-0. Joe Veleno gave Detroit a spark, and they looked alive after that. The penalty shot is what sunk them. If not for that penalty shot, which is a big if, but if not for that penalty shot, I really think that the ice was tilting in Detroit's favor, and they had a chance there. I don't know. Like I'm not sitting here saying, yeah, it's a great thing that Detroit lost to Winnipeg and Boston and an OT to Seattle. Like 1 point out of 6, phenomenal. No, of course not. But
would I take a 5-3-1 start to the season? Yeah, almost always.
Yeah, as Brad, going back to the top of it, Brad said, like, this is about where it all says it should be. The underlying, and if you average out what we've seen with our eyes, like the highs of the highs and the lows of the lows, yeah, these are some expected results. I will say now Detroit's going to be, on Long Island on Monday night at 7:30. They've
been playing okay too.
They have to come on the road and bring a much better game. I would like to see them not bank on, one player, breaking through or special teams controlling the game for them. You need to see them be able to do a little bit more in terms of controlling the pace, controlling the opportunities.
They're going up against another Vezina level goalie. There's not going to be any freebies out there. Well, I mean, maybe there will be.
But no, yeah.
Unlikely there will be.
You can't look at the Islanders' defense in Sorokin and say, yeah, those guys are going to make it easy for us. And you know what? You said this earlier, Evan. There aren't any free lunches in the NHL, especially not in this division, in this conference. Like, everyone's competing for this.
There's free games when you play Edmonton, but we're waiting for the West Coast swing.
That's right.
I will say there are no free lunches in the NHL, except maybe San Jose.
Oh, that is a free lunch.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. They are making the, 1920 Red Wings look like the 70s Montreal Canadiens.
It is. And that's what I mean. Like, now that Detroit is out of the San Jose, Montreal, although Montreal is, I think, technically ahead of Detroit in the standings. They're 5-2-1.
Yep.
But where they're expected to be by the end of the season, like if you're no longer talking draft lottery rivalries, like this is what it's like. Every single night, you have expectations against teams who, on paper, can beat you. The only difference before is those teams could also beat Detroit in previous seasons, but Detroit had no expectations against them, and this is the difference. So to wrap it up, one thing I want to say is I don't have any problem with people who look at those 3 games where Detroit walked away with 1 point of 6 and said, here are some really concerning signs, and I'm worried about the course of the season. Like, those are all fair. Like, you saw them, and I think it's correct to say Detroit has to work on a lot of those things, a lot of which we brought up on this episode so far, if this season is to have the kind of promise that we thought it did in the first 2 weeks. But where I land personally, my opinion is I'm not screaming that the sky is falling. I think part of this is regression to the mean, and I think part of this is just, this is the way it shook out for the Red Wings, and you're not going to have it every night. I'm not. I think you should be able to criticize a team even after a hot start. It's not bad to talk about a regression to the mean. It doesn't invalidate any of your opinions that you had before, or any of the good that the Red Wings had before. But I'm not Detroit is now in a tier with San Jose person. I think that's just too much doom, like a doomerness this early.
Nobody is in a tier with San Jose.
They're special, man.
They are.
And you know what?
They're over there eating glue.
I want to go to them. I want to go to Mike Greer and be like, hey, the Red Wings have been here before.
Man, teams don't tank, though, so maybe they'll hit a huge winning streak.
I want you to know.
Come on, man. They play in the Shark Tank.
I want you to know.
You're not wrong.
I want you to know there's a good chance you're not going to get Macklin and Celebrini. Detroit's been here. Other teams have been here.
No.
Ryan.
They will win it. They'll win it.
The other teams that have experienced what Detroit has have won lotteries. We are the exception.
Yeah, certainly feels.
Are you going to get the top player in one specific draft? No, the odds are against you. But given that San Jose is going to probably be in the next 7 of these, they're going to win a few of them.
Oh, man. How special. Anyhow, that's Detroit. They are currently, I will give you their standings update right now. They are currently not in a divisional seed. They're currently in the first wild card spot with Tampa Bay behind them, who could potentially pass them, as could New Jersey, who's just outside, as could, I believe, Philly, who could actually tie their record specifically. So, and as could Florida, et cetera, et cetera. You're seeing how this is going. Detroit is no longer off to that top of the East start, but again, it is still very early.
Yeah, it's almost like we're 9 games into the season and there's only so many points to go around. Although I think Vegas, remember how Vegas and Edmonton were supposed to be the go head-to-head in the Pacific? Isn't Vegas like 13 or 14 points ahead of Edmonton already?
Yeah, Vegas is 8-0-1 for 17 points, and Edmonton has 3 points, 1-5-1.
Whole good thing. You know what? As much as I would love to have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on my team, I'm very glad we're not an Edmonton podcast.
This would be...
Every year at the end of the season, we would just be screaming.
You know how those markets are. Like,
it's feast or famine in Edmonton.
And Edmonton's easier, I think, as far as Canadian markets go, but now that they have McDavid,
they're Florida North, basically, is how I think of it.
Very fair, actually. And, yeah, I don't know. We'll get to the Edmonton conversation. Okay, that's Detroit. That is our thoughts on the overall vibes. Why don't we get into some NHL news? Shane Pinto, who we talked about over the course of the summer and the start of the season because he didn't have a contract yet with Ottawa, a divisional foe for Detroit. We were monitoring that because he's an important piece of their depth. You know, I saw a notification pop up about him and I thought, oh, Pinto, here's his contract. Seemed like they were close, whatever. Nope, Shane Pinto suspended for 41 games for sports betting related issues. And I'm going to give you the rundown on this. And if it seems like the information is spotty and came out at a weird pace, that's exactly what happened. Essentially, the news that Pinto was going to be suspended for a long time dropped first. The official announcement wasn't too long afterwards. So much of this screams the NHL just wanted to get ahead of some things that they leaked before they wanted it to, but the notion was that Pinto was involved in sports betting of some kind, and he got a half-season suspension. That's heavy. That is like more than 10 times people get for hitting other players in the head. 20 times that in some cases. So I thought, okay, that's heavy. So was he betting on hockey? But then it was said from various sources and outlets that no, he wasn't explicitly betting on hockey. So I said something like, this doesn't sit right with me considering how the NHL has gone full bore into sports gambling if he wasn't even betting on hockey. And then I took it back and I realized how stupid I was being because the NHL was being very cagey. Like, we still don't have the exact details of what he did. And I think the reason we don't know that is because it's all being litigated and negotiated behind the scenes, and it's a very complicated thing. So essentially, Shane Pinto, at some point in the offseason, you know, he had an account with a sports betting site, which isn't, you know, players are allowed to bet on other sports, but there are different theories as to what happened. There was some impropriety or something untoward in the way he was handling that account. Some people have said it could be that he gave someone else access to it. Some people, it could have been, you know, they didn't, basically something in terms of how he was betting and the way the bets were being made or who had access to account. His account was just something that broke the trust and the the standards
agreed upon framework of what was allowed, basically.
Yeah, exactly. You don't suspend someone for 41 games unless they messed up badly.
Yeah.
And, you know, they landed on 41 games after the PA, the NHL.
Yeah,
PA
wasn't it basically
involved.
like a plea deal, essentially?
Yeah, we're not going to appeal this, and you give us, you know, a lower a sentence, so to speak. Because, Brad, you were saying before the show, the NHL wanted to give him a full season.
Yeah, the opening punishment issued by the NHL, at least in proposal, was a full season. And the NHLPA was able to negotiate that down to 41. And a plea deal is actually probably a great way of phrasing it. We won't appeal, you know, X, Y, and Z, but you only give them 41 games. And then the NHL can go, okay, no appeal. We can just be done with it, sweep it under the rug. It makes sense.
So whatever happened was severe enough where the NHL really wanted to stamp this out. Because we've all seen, like, even before, you know, sports betting really got into the NHL, like, we've all heard of points shaving, the whole Everyone will remember the scandal with the Coyotes. Everyone will remember the scandal in the NBA with the referees. Like there's
Pete Rose.
Yeah, Pete Rose. Like you get into
Paul Crew in The Longest Yard.
Such a good movie. That's still one of the
good.
most quoted movies between me and my friends.
Oh, 1,000%.
Every time I shank a shot in golf, I say, I knew I shouldn't have had that popcorn. If you mess up in sports, you just say that.
I don't
and it's
even know if
carte
I've
blanche.
watched that movie.
Come on.
Longest Yard, is that Adam Sandler?
Yeah.
Nah,
that-
I don't know. I think I've seen clips.
You got to watch it. You'd love it.
I don't-
It's stupid
okay.
humor, so you would get it.
Is Goldberg the wrestler in that movie?
Yes.
Okay, maybe I have seen it.
Joey Diaz, Burt Reynolds.
Anyhow.
it was a mix.
It was anyhow. There was enough here where it was like, if this gets out and goes unpunished, like you can't break the public and the fans' trust in a sport, period. Like it is devastating to the standards of a sport.
Oh, I don't think they give a shit about the fans.
No.
I think they give a shit. I think they. I mean that's obvious. I think they care about what sponsors and the people who pump millions of dollars into this business.
That's the part that's really going to motivate them, and not just the sponsors. It's also, if you're going to have sports gambling money in, you can't. The integrity has to be foremost.
Yeah,
exactly. That's the word. The integrity of the result. People are making fun of the Pinto suspension, given the absolutely insane amount of gambling ads.
Isn't there a picture of Pinto's helmet having a gambling ad on?
Yeah. Isn't that one of their advertisements? Like
Yes.
that's Ottawa's helmet?
Yeah.
ad?
Yes. And, people are making fun of that, but that is the reason this has to be so severe, because the NHL is leaning into the gambling so much that the gambling has to be, it sounds dumb, a safe space in terms of stuff like this, because if there is any impropriety or any questions about the integrity of the result of the game, hence the result of the bets, there's millions of dollars out there. People are going to lose their minds. And the NHL is making so much money off this. If BetMGM or Bet99 or what the hell ever one goes, what the hell is going on here? It's a major problem for the NHL.
We're talking like, if this money goes away, the cap goes flat again. Like you cannot, as a business, you cannot as a sport ever let this happen. And even before, I think the NHL would have come down hard. There have been instances in the past, but especially now, it is like you have to be so extra vigilant. So that's why I was like, no, I'm being dumb. Very obviously there was something here. You look at Pinto's, response or his statement that he put out. That is a guy who showed contrition and like he knows and acknowledges that he did something wrong. He's going to have to take a lump on his next contract. All of his leverage is gone now. Ottawa, actually, credit to them, did quite a bit to protect him because no one really had a note about this for a long time. I know quite a few people in the Ottawa world didn't hear a whisper about it. Even like the Saravalli and Friedman, they said they were only really working on it for like a week and a half. Like Ottawa really kept this under wraps. So whatever it was, whatever the details are, they'll come out in due time. Has something to do with either information being passed to someone else or someone else having access to an account and the way the bets were being made or whatever it is. I don't think it was like malicious or that he was running some whole gambling ring that was ruining the integrity of the sport, but it's a line that you
got to throw the book at somebody when when the stake, sorry, no pun intended, when the stakes are this high.
Yeah, you have to. You cannot let a toe go across the line. You cannot even leave a crack in the door, because for this to exist in this way, it has to be absolute zero tolerance.
Yeah, because even if it wasn't malicious,
it's just nope.
He's right now. Then he's paying the stupid tax.
Yep, 100%. And that's essentially how it was put forward. It's like he made a mistake, a dumb mistake, but he made a mistake.
And they got to come out heavy so that it detracts any of the other players to make similar mistakes. Like they have to set a precedence, and it has to be heavy.
So, I mean, like, yeah, that's something that they had to do. Ottawa also, I think, got away lucky here because they were.
Imagine if they had to like trade someone to sign him.
Yeah, that's what they were talking about doing.
Then they were out 2 players.
Oh my god!
I mean, that would feel so bad for them.
That would be the wildest twist to the summer of Pierre. And Ottawa's. I just want to say for a second, obviously there's the rivalry right now between Detroit and Ottawa, but Ottawa has had a rough rough ride of late. The Pinto situation. Thomas Chabot out 4 to 6 weeks with a fractured hand. Brandstrom and Zub also out. And there's now talks of that whole trade situation with Vegas from way, way back that, there's rumors of Ottawa being penalized for that retroactively for improper communication with Vegas and the whole the trade list and the no trade clause and all that. And there's talks of them losing a pick. There's whispers of a first-round pick, but a pick going away from them. Like, not all of it just random happenstance, some of it self-inflicted, but Ottawa, well, I have a buddy who's an Ottawa fan, and he's like, I'm looking for that meme right now to send you, like, why does God give his toughest test to his strongest soldiers? Like, the Sens are going through it.
After having to deal with their fan base on Twitter all summer, I'm okay with this.
Look, man.
I don't cry for any other fan base. I don't even cry for the Red Wing fan base.
We had a lot of years of success.
Yeah.
We can't cry too much.
We were allowed to cry for exactly 1 day a year over the last 7 years. And that was draft lottery day.
That's so
it.
Painfully true.
Everything else we can fall back on the streak. Those, though, this is our day to mourn.
Mika, when she's older, I've seen my dad cry twice in my life. Once when Nick Lidstrom retired, and then every other time they lost a draft lottery. Pretty much. Yeah, that was some news with Shane Pinto. Again, the details aren't out, but you can deduce pretty easily why they had to come down like this. The Edmonton Oilers, we talked about them already on the show, but I just have to go back to it. A lot of people had them as potential cup candidates, favorites out of the West, the only ones who are really going to compete with Colorado, Dallas, Vegas. They are currently 31st of 32 teams in the league. 1-5-1, 3 points. McDavid is coming back now, but he was hurt for a little stretch there. Atrocious start to the season. -13 goal differential, good for second worst in the league. A horrible nightmare start for the Oilers. They can't afford this year, right? Like the clock has run out. All their gimmies are gone. All of their, free passes are gone. Like, they need to be able to convince McDavid and Draisaitl that they can do this here. But they can't afford this of all seasons this season.
Well, when you look at the way this team is constructed, you have Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, and then
Nugent Hopkins is the only other person that really comes to mind.
Exactly. Darnell Nurse makes Norris money.
He's coming to mind, but for a far different reason.
They're, you know how some teams have a 1A, 1B goalie situation? Edmonton's really leaning into the 2A, 2B. Can't get a save, can't defend, and, McDavid and Draisaitl themselves have put up okay numbers this year, but a far stretch from their standard.
They will get back to their standard.
Oh, yeah. Right now, Jack Hughes is probably the biggest problem for the Pacific Division, because McDavid's looking at his near 3 points per game and going,
Yeah.
While he's itching to get back going, no.
Oh, and he sees that. And everyone is doing the whole, is Jack Hughes one of the best players in the world? And McDavid's like, he's going to go nuclear. He is.
He's seething,
yes,
waiting to get back onto the ice, looking at all the narratives around Jack Hughes right now. And rightfully so, because McDavid wasn't McDavid before his injuries, so he's got to step his game up. Edmonton's in one of those situations right now where literally everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. McDavid got hurt. They can't get a save. They can't defend. Their depth is getting exposed at forward. Their acquisitions, most notably Connor Brown, have done nothing. It's just everything that could go wrong has. And we talked about it with the Red Wings. Hey, when you're bad is still you're in the game, that's a good sign. Edmonton's bad is 1-5-1.
Edmonton's bad is you lost, 8-1 to the Vancouver Canucks, who've been doing great to start the season on opening night. Like, that's
a bad start.
That sticks with you.
We've been talking about how the Red Wings at least have the ability to out-depth teams, even though they lack the McDavid and Draisaitl's of the world. Edmonton's the complete inverse. McDavid and Draisaitl have to beat you, or you're going to absolutely walk the Oilers. And it's getting exposed right now.
And you'd think, if I just said their decor of Evan Bouchard, Darnell Nurse, Matthias Ekholm, and Philip Broberg, you would think, that's an extremely competent top four. But man, this team is in a world of hurt, and I don't know how you address depth when that's what you've been attempting. You've been attempting to address depth for 4 years, and you're still somewhat in the same spot.
And they don't even have enough cap space to roster a full roster right now. So
what I will say is I think there are changes coming in Edmonton. I do believe Ken Holland's time is going to come to an end by retirement. I heard rumors about that last year.
Is it retirement or retirement?
I think it's genuine. Like, he's had this planned.
Like, I'm so sick of this shit.
He's been in the game for a long time, right? And I think he's had this planned. It's not that, like, of course he'd love to win with McDavid, and he still might, but I don't know that he's going to go much beyond this season or next, if that, based on what I've heard. And so I don't know. Someone's going to have a job to do in Edmonton to kind of get out of this cap tangle, but you can't wait until that happens because Brad alluded to it. McDavid's one of the most competitive players in professional sports. And that is a common theme among, the best of the best of the best. They all are like that. And they care about things like their name being on top of the stats list, their name being at I'm the best player in the world conversation, their name being on the Stanley Cup. Like, every single thing that they can compete in, they compete in. Them having the highest AAV compared to their peers. That matters to them. McDavid wants to do this in Edmonton. I don't doubt that. Draisaitl, of course. I don't doubt that at all. But
at some point, you're like, what the hell are we doing here?
Yep. I think you're pushing your luck by not finding a way to make this work. And with the goaltending, like, I don't know, maybe it's too much of a generality, but the way I see goaltending is if you have a good goalie who's performed well in the past, who all of a sudden just can't turn it on, and it's not really explained by much else, like he's not 42 years old or anything like that, I start to think systems, like the defensive systems in front of him, like the way you're handling the game in front of him and around him, like you're not setting him up for success. And I know not everyone can, not every team has the personnel to do what Carolina does, for example, or Boston or whatever, but whatever's happening in Edmonton is just not working for those goalies.
Well, Jack Campbell's biggest enemy is Jack Campbell. It's been game. Sort of his MO his entire career, which is so unfortunate because there's stretches where he looks almost unbeatable, and then he lets in a soft one, and it's like this guy's world starts to crumble around him. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting storylines going on in Edmonton now that I think about it. But man, it is a tough spot to be right now as a fan.
Someone who's in the opposite spot, Jack Hughes, because, for all the start that Dylan Larkin and Alex DeBrincat had at the top of the NHL charts in terms of goals and points, Larkin's still second, 15 points in 9 games. But in 2 fewer games, Jack Hughes has 18 points.
That is outrageous.
Yeah, he has been absolutely unreal. The emergence isn't sudden. Anyone who's been watching Jack Hughes over the past few years knows exactly how good he's been. And the fact that he was going to pop off, injuries kind of hid a little bit of that for some time. But, the moment he signed that contract that he's on now, I'm like, oh, God, that's going to be so good for New Jersey. And he is going to be, I think he's going to join like the McKinnon-Matthews tier of players a lot of the time where you're like, on their night, they could be the best player in the world. And this is a guy who could make a difference in a cup run.
Well, he's almost 3 points per game. So that theory seems pretty sound.
I don't want to think of draft lotteries or anything like that, but yeah, that's who you expect New Jersey would have gotten, and this is the Jack Hughes as described as we were scouting him.
Imagine if we lost the Jack Hughes lottery and ended up with Alex Turcotte instead of Mo Seider.
Yeah, it's funny how that shook out, because Turcotte is arguably one of the most disappointing storylines from that draft.
And he went 1 pick ahead of Detroit, and pretty strong bet he would have ended up in Detroit had he fallen that one more spot. Same with Kirby Dach. Had Chicago knock on him at 3, we know Detroit was all over him.
Well, Dach's
a good player. He ain't Jack Hughes or Mo Seider.
No. Montreal Dach is way different than Chicago Dach. Yeah. Anyhow, those are some storylines from across the NHL. We're actually just going to jump into overtime now on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show. The entry into our giveaways, like the 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game, the Discord, and the bonus episodes are some of the benefits that you get. You allow us to continue to produce the show, host Winged Wheel Podcast nights at the LCA in partnership with the Detroit Red Wings. support the Jamie Daniels Foundation and continue the growth of our kind of content network. Expected by Whom is a show hosted by Prashanth Iyer and Sean Shapiro. Give them a follow and definitely give them a listen as well. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. Let's take some questions from our patrons. The Mexanadian says, what do you think of Seider's performance so far this year? He's at a point per game so far, yet a lot of people are saying he doesn't look good. Personally, I think he's made some unnecessary moves, but he's still Mo Seider and will produce regardless.
He's been fine. A couple bonehead decisions, but for 90% of the game, he's good. Little bit of the Brendan Smith syndrome so far early in the season is probably the best way I can put it.
Yeah, Mo Seider, 8 points in 9 games. Like, what you said is he's still Mo Seider. That's a great way to put it, because even when he's not doing his best, he's still putting up 8 points in 9 games. We just know what Mo Seider can be, and he can lock it down defensively, and he can make, unreal breakout plays and constantly be in the right spot and, take guys out of the play rather than get turned around. And I think we've seen not enough of that so far and some avoidable mistakes. So I think it's fair to call out that he's not been at his best. It seems to be how he starts seasons. You hope he breaks out of that. That's just part of being a young player in the NHL. But has he been terrible? No. Has he been Mo Seider level good? I'd say no. And that still is 8 points. Aaron Hudson says, hey guys, given the sad incident in the EIHL, I really think it's time the NHL and all other leagues mandate some form of neck protection. These things don't happen often, thank God, but let's do what we can to make them an even rarer occurrence.
It's always been crazy to me how it's not mandatory in any league once you get past junior.
I think
how professional athletes are resistant to change, even as dumb as that sounds, but think of how long it took them to get guys to even just wear helmets.
Yeah, helmets, visors. You always look back and say, look at the
wow,
resistance.
I can't believe they did. I can't believe goalies played without a helmet. I can't believe players played without a helmet.
And it's not just hockey players. To make a comparison,
every sports kind of has their moment in the sun like that.
Formula One, which is objectively an incredibly dangerous sport, they have this thing. It's like their version of the roll cage, and it's essentially like a hoop above their head, and then there's a bar that comes straight down the middle, and people are like, it obstructs their vision. Not really. A driver's never looking dead straight. They're always looking at the turn, whatever. But there was so much pushback from the drivers themselves about visibility, how it looked, etc. And then over the course of however many seasons since it's been implemented, you can pick 5 times where it flat out just saved someone's life. You would have seen a gruesome tire crushing someone's head. It stopped a car from landing on them. And the conversation now is, I can't believe I pushed back on that because it saved my life. And that's the kind of thing, it's universal across sports. And I think leagues have you have a fine line to walk, because some element of it is there's a risk in the game. But to me, some Kevlar around your neck is a small price to pay to stave off the worst. Even if it never affects you in your career, you just don't want that coming into play. Dead Aim says, we knew something like this would happen. Hopefully it's not a sign of things to come and of more growing pains with the Red Wings. The team is coming out slow the last week of games. Do we need a change on defense, or is it the forward pairings?
I wonder, I know this is pure speculation, but remember DeBrincat was out kind of with an illness? I don't know. Everybody seems a little bit more lethargic than they were
you think
before.
There's a bug?
It's totally speculation, and I have no insight into this at all. But the Red Wings were playing high pace, up tempo, and creating a lot of chances, and now they just look a little bit off, a little bit slower. I don't know. I'm totally just spitballing that idea.
Maybe whatever went through us in September is now reaching NHL teams.
I pray for them.
Yeah, it's not great. I was talking to someone else actually in the Detroit media world, and they're going through it too. It's not a fun time. Bruce Boudreau's nuclear Warensky-Shire barbecue sauce. You got me with that one. Says, been banging this drum in other circles for a while now, but shouldn't everyone be concerned that the cap very well could flatten out again? The bad economy for the U.S. and Canada is likely going to negatively impact hockey-related revenue, and overall advertising budgets seem to be getting cut across the landscape as well. That is very true, let me tell you. Should the NHL really be considering expanding again before finances are more certain? Well, you know what expansion comes with? $1 billion expansion fee from outside money.
Yeah, you know who likes cash injections?
Yeah.
The government and the NHL.
Billionaires love to get $1 billion. That's how they became billionaires. So you're right that there's economic risk to the league right now, where we had a conversation on a previous show. Like, tickets are getting expensive and you're not seeing barns fill up like you used to. But expansion will be, I actually think it makes expansion more likely because ownership is greedy and the league will want to continue to show growth on, you know, they want to show how big that green number is. And if the expansion fee really is $1 billion, they're going to do that. My prediction, by the time we reach 2030, we will have or have plans for 36 teams in the NHL.
Plans or have them in the league?
Yeah.
No, wait, that was a question.
No, either one.
Yes?
No, either one.
Okay.
I don't think it's feasible for, Jesus. What does yours say? Dude.
Hey guys, who's on first?
Yeah, it was that, but much stupider. Lars Thorzel says, hello, lads. Apparently the sky is falling since the plan to win 81 straight games failed. Oh, well, we are still making the playoffs. A team that is looking very shaky so far is the Calgary Flames. If they choose to tear it down and start an early rebuild or go for some kind of a retool, should Detroit go for a trade for Elias Lindholm and try to sign him? He's a very solid center and would allow Detroit to have more of a 1-2 punch, right? Cheers, boys, and keep up the great work.
Two things. Based on multiple reports stating that Lindholm's contract request is around what Larkin got, my answer to that would be hell no. But more relevantly, the Calgary Flames, go look at their contract structure and situation right now. They do not have the option to rebuild because everybody on that core except Lindholm is signed for the next 7 to 8 years.
This is the first year of Jonathan Huberdeau's $10.5 million contract.
And Mackenzie Weegar and Backlund's got a new extension kicking in, and Kadri's got 6 or 7 years left. They can't do anything. I think Markstrom's got a bunch of years left. They are stuck.
And they have a new barn being built, so they're not going to suck and come into that sucking. Like, they're going to need fans in that building. Like, yeah, they're going to stick.
Who'd ever open up a new arena in a rebuild? That's weird.
It is Detroit 1-1. Last question here from Darren Fick says, could anyone have foreseen the streak of great play from Joey V? Anyone at all? Darren is banging the Joey Veleno drum for a long time. I love that he's taking this prove it year to heart while he's obviously not going to score every game the rest of the way, unless you can bet he'll still be noticeable. All said, what do you now think is a realistic career path? Elite 3C, a comfort type guy that slowly works his way up the lineup, gone at the trade deadline. I'm rooting for a Draper-like career, a solid glue guy for years to come.
I'm not saying he's going to do it, but the Rocket Richard conversation should be had.
We need to at least talk about it.
We can't ignore that. Justin Hall as well for Norris, all of that. I think the Confer outcome would be a great result for Joe Veleno. I don't know necessarily that that's likely, but well, let's see how he's doing at the end of the season. Like, if he puts up a full year like this, then yeah, you could see him as a, good 3C option, fill in 2C option that plays both ways, can contribute from time to time. That would be great.
Teams love guys like that too.
Yeah, they will have a spot. They're not going to be the guys who get $10 million, but
they're getting a contract every single time they're due for one.
They'll get overpaid in free agency if they choose to walk, and they'll always have job security, 100%. All right, folks, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. Again, Winged Wheel Podcast night at the LCA is Saturday, November 4th. wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings, or go to the link in the description to get your tickets. It is very, very important that you do so before they run out or go away. So again, wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings, Saturday, November 4th. We'd like to thank all of you so much for tuning in. To any new listeners, welcome to the show, and listeners of old, thanks for sticking with us. And to all of our patrons, you are who makes this happen. Our name level supporters on Patreon, thank you so very much. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Raymond's Missing Tooth, Icon, Brad's Lord and Savior, Bradley Cleveland, Glenn Brabham, Everybody Loves Raymond, Croner's Left Knee, Ashley Van Conant, Sea Lion, Keenan O'Donohue, Yanni Burgers, Meals on Wheels, Matthew M. Rice, Admiral Matt S. at the Cheesebag Navy, Brian J. Bauer, Carl Bertina Nanalewski, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Coyote Season Tickets and Anywhere But Tempe, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, D-Town, Westside, brand new name level supporter, Exquisitine Buble Schwinslow, Give Blood Fight Probert, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joel Miranda, Kalen Wood, King Tone, Marcus, Marlon Winchester, Matt K. Cannon Fodder to the Cheesebag Army, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Never Go Full Kyle, R.A. Red 3, Ryan Hubbard, Ryan Vargas, brand new name level supporter, great name, Ryan, Scott Martin, Scree and Lube, Brian Vasha, That's What I Appreciate About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, We're All Out of Pinto, Are Black Beans Okay Instead? That's good. Eyes Are Playing Stan, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, Adam Rose, Andrew Broderick, brand new name level supporter, welcome Andrew, Axel Sandy Pelica, Big Cheese, Brad Simmons, Brian Vasha, Chuck Buffchest, the Tarpless Goon, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, D-Boss Snip Show, Frank Stanley, Ferk Houston, NHL to Portland, baby, Gene Sullivan, Griffey Boy, Healthy Scratch in the NOSHO, Henrik Robert Deeks, James Laporte, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, John Evans Derogatory, John Ingalls, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, Norris Seider, Ophelia, Steven, the Hodag, the Mexanadian, the Hat 123, Winging It in San Diego, formerly AA Ron, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We'll talk to you Wednesday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.